So, as a psychologist, one of the things I'm curious about in social settings, you know, people inevitably ask, so what do you do? When they learn that you're a psychologist, what sort of reactions do you get?
Well, I do the best I can to hide the fact that I'm a psychologist in social settings. Usually I tell people I'm a painter or I'm an electrician, something that nobody's going to ask any follow-up questions to. But when people do know what I do, it's really hard. At first, people always assume that I can read their mind. So people are uncomfortable and nervous around me. And, I tell people all the time, listen, I only work and I'm getting paid. Like, I'm not doing my job right now at this cocktail party. So don't worry about it. But then inevitably they want to open up and share. And it's like this immediate access to people's interior life. And they're sharing their difficulties or their wounds or whatever else. And sometimes it's a lot to try to navigate when you're sipping on your cocktail and trying to talk about the sports, the Yankees, or something else that's going on.
I can imagine. I can imagine. People come to therapy for all sorts of reasons. One thing I've often wondered is, do people sometimes come to therapy to avoid something rather than to face something?
Oh, wow. Oh, to avoid something, I think so. I think a lot of times people are surprised if we really hang in there together at what ends up coming up. And in most cases, what people end up working on in therapy is not what they came on the first day for. And so a lot of times in that process, we can uncover things they might be avoiding actually needing to work on. And coming to therapy might just be their way of sort of checking the box. They think they're doing everything they're supposed to do. And I think, unfortunately, in a lot of sort of therapeutic environments, the professional involved might sort of go along with that, and they might just get away with that. And I know people have spun their wheels for years going to a therapist, but not really working on the deeper issues that need to be uncovered.
So, if someone is thinking about seeing a therapist for the first time in their life,
Mm,
what advice would you have for them?
mm. Find the right person. You're opening up your heart and your soul and the intimacy of your own interior life and likely your family life and all sorts of other areas to a stranger. And, if you drive a nice car, you're going to find the mechanic that knows how to work on that car. If you drive a piece of garbage car and you have a flat tire or something, maybe you don't care where you take it. But when you're taking your own interior life someplace to be worked on, it requires at least the same amount of effort in finding the right place. And the way that we're built is so important when it comes to somebody fixing what might be broken. We need to have somebody who has a blueprint, an understanding of how we're built, if they're going to offer some way of actually helping you.
Hmm.
And that blueprint is what's missing in most of secular psychotherapy.
Is it because they've thrown God and spirituality away?
100%. Without that foundation, there's no grounding in which to really understand anything that we're observing through science. The science is so important. It's about measuring the observable world around us, testing it, proving hypotheses or null hypotheses. These things are important. But without that grounding on that foundation of our spiritual dimension, our eternal dimension, what we're made for, we won't be able to make sense of what we're observing. So these secular modalities are really just shooting in the dark, trying to figure out how to make sense of what we're observing. And at the end of the day, if we don't have that spiritual blueprint, if we don't understand we're made in the image of God, that we're headed towards divine union with God, we're not going to be able to really make headway with what we're seeing.
So, in economics, there's a theory, sunk cost bias.
Mm,
Where someone buys something, it's no longer worth what they bought it for,
mm.
but they keep investing into it or keep holding on to it, thinking that it will one day return to its previous value. Sometimes people will say, "Oh yes, I've been seeing this therapist for 3 years or 5 years or longer.
Yeah.
And you ask that person, okay, well, what is it about that relationship that works for you? Or do you feel like your therapist is a really good fit for you?
Yeah.
And they'll often say, well, actually, no. But I've been with her for so long, or I've been with him for so long. So they've sort of got this sunk cost bias. They have a sense that it's not really working, but this person knows all about their life. This person knows all about their family, knows the things they struggle with. So they're hesitant to make a shift.
Yeah, definitely.
And move to a therapist who might be able to help them more effectively or in a deeper way. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, it's really subtle, and it's sometimes not as obvious even as realizing this isn't really going anywhere. Sometimes it feels like this is the best that I can get because that person only knows that one box that they've checked. And so they don't even realize that they're missing out on something better. So sometimes I offer sort of an outside perspective of some more objective criteria. You know, if you're with somebody, it's not just about, everybody thinks rapport is important. It is very important. You have to have rapport. But being challenged is also very important. You know, so if you have a therapist that you never feel challenged by, that's going to be a problem. You know, your therapist is not just your best friend. It's not the person to just always validate everything you do. There should be deep validation of who you are as a person. But then also, there should be this momentum moving forward. There's a growth, there's a trajectory. And if you can't see that there's actually a growth and a trajectory happening, then it's probably time to take a step back and reevaluate.
So this challenging piece that you talk about is a part of every relationship. Whenever we're trying to help other people become the best version of themselves, there should be challenge, there should be encouragement, you know, there should be both of these things. How do you know how much you can challenge a patient?
Well, to be totally honest, I don't always know. You know, to be really honest, I make mistakes on that line, and it can be really difficult. So it's a little bit of a give and take in terms of putting myself out there, and then if I make a mistake, also having the humility to acknowledge it and even to apologize if necessary. But at the same time, you sort of develop an insight, a little intuition into having a grounding and some rapport. Like there's enough of a connection here. And I also know based on my own heart's disposition, because I really love my patients, and I can tell what's going on with the relationship based on what's going on inside of me. And as I'm growing in understanding of this person and I'm growing in love with this person, I know that we're on solid ground. I've had the experience of being more challenged to develop that sense of love within myself for certain patients. So I can also figure out like, okay, what's my stuff getting in the way here? And I'll take that to my own work. I have my own therapy. I have my own colleagues that I go to for support. And then I'll kind of like work on like, who does this person remind me of, or what is coming up? What are my fears? What are my insecurities? And then once I move those blocks, then I come back and I can redevelop and try to regain that traction with the patient. And so as that's happening, I have that internal compass that lets me know like, all right, we're ready to take that next step because I'm ready to take that next step. I'm not going to lose the connection that I've developed or need to develop.